your agreement that you've made with them about...
What agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that
point. Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them. But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
What we just witnessed in this Senate hearing was nothing short of political theater. A senator unleashing a laundry list of accusations against Secretary Rubio, blasting President Trump's foreign aid freeze, slamming the reorganization of USAID, and even throwing in claims about starving people overseas and wasted taxpayer money. The senator painted a picture of chaos, illegality, and American decline. But here's the truth. This isn't about protecting America's interests. This is about Democrats clinging to failed globalist policies, refusing to admit that President Trump and Secretary Rubio are doing what's necessary to restore accountability, sovereignty, and strength to American foreign policy. Welcome to America Viewpoint, where we speak the truth, defend our freedoms, and fight for the values that made this nation great. No censorship, no woke spin, just bold, unfiltered commentary from real Americans who love this country. If you're tired of the lies and ready to stand for faith, family, and freedom, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the Liberty Bell, because this is where the fight begins.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you have done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court. And as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor. Revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. We have worked together for years in a bipartisan way to advance U.S. interests and fund those programs. So with respect to my colleagues, how long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Are we going to roll over as Trump tramples our laws and undermines our U.S. leadership, burns down what we have spent decades building, and let millions of people across our globe suffer and die? Or are we going to stand up, push back, assert our constitutional power of the purse? And to my colleagues on both sides, this is the moment to decide whether this committee continues to be a powerful bipartisan force, a force that I think we've all been proud of for a very long time, a force that is focused on safety and economic strength and national security, focused on leading the world in research and development and countering China and others with our soft power and our military power. Every single member of this committee knows what we are risking by letting this administration tear down so much. On USAID and other programs, we can always talk about how we can make things work better and other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Now, Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first of all, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
What agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that point.
Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents. residents because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them.
No.
But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and empowerment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled, and I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us, like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information when you put together a budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
The senator opened with a blistering attack, claiming that within hours of taking office, President Trump and Secretary Rubio illegally halted billions of dollars in foreign aid. They called it a violation of appropriation laws, the Anti-Deficiency Act, even the Empowerment Control Act. Big words, scary words. But let's ask the real question. What's the problem with hitting the pause button on foreign aid? We send billions overseas while our own borders leak, our veterans struggle, and families here at home face rising costs. Isn't it common sense that a new administration should review where the money is going, who it's benefiting, and whether it aligns with America's national interest? That's not illegality. That's leadership. Next, we heard a dramatic story about USAID being illegally shuttered, employees locked out of offices, life-saving work halted, and global staff recalled. The senator even accused Rubio of paying people not to work. Sounds dramatic, but here's the truth. USAID has long been bloated, inefficient, and unaccountable. If we're serious about reforming government, sometimes you have to shut the machine down, clear out the waste, and rebuild. The left frames this as cruelty. But ask yourself, how many American lives have been lost because our taxpayer dollars were funneled into corrupt programs abroad instead of securing our streets, fixing our infrastructure, or helping American farmers? The senator then went on about U.S. companies not being paid for services, even a Supreme Court case. Again, dramatic. But here's the missing context. When you stop a massive, entrenched foreign aid bureaucracy, contracts get tangled. Not because the law was broken, but because the swamp was never designed for accountability. Rubio is trying to reform a broken system. And yes, reform is messy. But do we want endless business as usual? Or do we want accountability for every single taxpayer dollar? Another theme was lack of transparency, claims that Congress sent hundreds of emails with no response. This is the kind of Washington complaint that sounds worse than it is. Secretary Rubio pointed out they've done over 600 briefings. 600. That's not stonewalling. That's engagement. But the reality is, no matter how much information you give, Democrats always demand more because they don't like the answers. Here's a big one. The senator attacked Rubio's plan to eliminate 270 offices and fold USAID into the State Department. Think about that. 270 offices. Does anyone really believe all 270 are vital? Or is this bureaucracy protecting itself? Streamlining agencies is exactly what conservatives have been calling for. Less overlap, more accountability. It's about time someone had the guts to do it. The senator pressed Rubio on an agreement with El Salvador, where 250 dangerous criminals were taken in. He wanted funding details, but Rubio made the key point. We provided law enforcement assistance. El Salvador chose how to use it. That's sovereignty. That's partnership. And let's be honest, isn't it better that 250 gangbangers are off the streets and locked up abroad instead of roaming free or flooding into our communities? That's a win for America. The senator complained about a 91% cut to counter narcotics and law enforcement programs, suggesting it makes America less safe. But here's the truth. Throwing money at a problem overseas doesn't always make us safer. Look at Afghanistan. 2 decades of aid, billions wasted, and what did we get? A Taliban takeover. Real security comes from strong borders, law enforcement here at home, and a military that commands respect, not endless foreign aid checks. This was the senator's big rallying cry. Congress must reassert its constitutional power of the purse and push back against Trump. But here's the irony. When Congress rubber stamps bloated spending bills and globalist programs, that is what undermines the Constitution. The founders didn't intend for America's money to be spent building bureaucracies in every corner of the globe. They intended for America's government to serve Americans. Throughout the exchange, Rubio stayed calm. He pushed back, pointing out the inaccuracies, reminding the committee of the hundreds of briefings, and clarifying that no U.S. residents were deported in the El Salvador arrangement. That's key. The senator threw accusations. Rubio responded with facts. At the end of the day, this hearing wasn't about transparency or legality. It was about one thing: Democrats refusing to accept that President Trump and Secretary Rubio are willing to disrupt the status quo. And the status quo is exactly what got us endless wars, endless aid bills, and endless American decline. Let's step back. Why does this matter? Because this hearing represents the clash between two visions. One vision says America's resources should be spread across the world, propping up foreign governments, funding questionable NGOs, and bowing to international institutions. The other vision, the America First vision, says our tax dollars should go first to securing our border, rebuilding our economy, defending our sovereignty, and standing strong on the world stage from a position of strength. Which vision do you think the founders would support? Which vision do you think hardworking Americans support? We need to ask, where's the accountability? Why do Democrats cry foul when a Republican leader finally reigns in waste and puts America first? Why is it illegal to demand oversight, but perfectly legal to waste billions on programs that don't help American citizens? That's not leadership, that's surrender. And we don't surrender. Not to global elites, not to bureaucrats, and not to anyone who thinks American taxpayer dollars are theirs to spend as they please. What we saw in this hearing was a senator delivering a 7-minute speech filled with accusations, but short on truth. Secretary Rubio stood his ground, defended the administration's actions, and made clear that America has the right to reassert control over its own money and its own destiny. And that's exactly why we need strong voices like this. Because the fight isn't just in Washington. It's in every home, every business, every heart of every patriot who believes in America first. This is America Viewpoint, where we don't whisper, we roar. We stand tall, speak loud, and never back down from defending truth and liberty. If this message fired you up, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the fight for America doesn't end when the video does. Until next time, stay strong, stay free, and may God bless the United States of America.